very serious developments over the last week that you've been here in Park City. First, can you talk about this killing of this activist leader?
Yeah. She was going to put a wreath on the grave of people that had died in the 2011 uprising. She was shot at a 2-meter distance by police, eyewitnesses say, and Rajia Amran, a dear friend and a human rights lawyer who was both in the film The Square and is continuing to work on the ground defending many of the protesters that are in prison, attended her autopsy and said she was pummeled in the back by birdshot, which caused internal bleeding, which led to her death. But the impunity of policemen shooting in broad daylight is something that we need to talk about, just like the killings of police here around the world is something that can't go in silence.
The killings of protesters?
Well, the killing of protesters, yeah. I mean, since Shaimaa, there's been around 18 people, I believe, that have been killed.
You have been documenting change in Egypt, Karim. A major day in Egypt is January 25th. Now, as we move forward, talk about these dates, because it didn't just happen on one day.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really important for us as people who are storytellers and active in trying to propel this change forward is the difference between the event of change and the ongoing struggle for change. I mean, we have these dates, we have these important moments that we like to reference to, like January 25th, but the reality is that there's an ongoing struggle that continues. And like all social change, the fight for democracy in Egypt and across the region is going to continue, and change does not necessarily happen in a linear manner. It's you know, there's a series of ups and downs, and we've seen, like in many revolutions in the past, a counter-revolution that is vibrant. But what keeps us optimistic is that the same critical mass of young people that you saw in our film, The Square, and that many saw on programs like yours, are continuing to stand up, are continuing to say we will not allow for our story to be written for us. We will continue to fight and believe that we have the right to write a more equitable story. And I think that is what's shaping the future of the country, and we will get there eventually.
And Jahan, the significance of January 28th?
Significance of January 28th was that it was the time that people came back. I mean, I've been following protests for a long time in Egypt, made a film in 2007 where you would watch protests happen, people would be beaten up, jailed, but people wouldn't come back. And what happened on January 28th, people came back and said, we will not allow this, and they stayed. And it was really where you saw those images of people really standing up to the police for the first time. It was where that iconic image took place on the bridge, where people were showered. So at this time, years later, it's a difficult time to be optimistic. I would say that we're very optimistic people in general, but being on, continuing to talk to people on the ground in Egypt, going back, it is a very difficult time to be optimistic. But as Karim said, it's so important that we continue to be engaged, because in many movements of the past, civil rights movement and others, there have been such ups and downs and terrible downs, and we just need to remember that if we keep engaged, keep telling these stories, that we will ultimately get to a better place.
I wanted to talk about a young woman who worked on your film, yes, who we met here at Sundance 2 years ago when The Square came out, Sana al-Saif. She worked on The Square. She's now in prison in Egypt. Sana helped publish a newspaper in defiance of laws requiring government permission when she was 17. But when you all had The Square here, she was one of those part of your team that came out. I had a chance to interview her here at Sundance. She was 19 years old at the time.
It's an amazing experience. The best thing, the thing that makes me really respect Jahan and that made me want to work with her is that most of the cameras left The Square after the step down.
The step down is when Mubarak was...
When Mubarak stepped down, yes. Everybody was talking all over the world. We were talking about the Arab Spring, but all the cameras left, and we were left alone in the square. And the army was really vicious. And these cameras, this media, we didn't get that media attention back until we lost a huge number of people. It takes if you have 2 people or 3 people dying in the square, the media is not gonna be interested in that story. But if you have a big massacre like Maspero, 28 people being crushed by army tanks, then now the media cares. I think if there has been much more media attention, it could have stopped the bloodshed. It's possible.
That's Sana Saif. She was 19 when she came here to Sundance 2 years ago with you too, as you were winning these major awards, the whole team for the Square. What's happened now?
Sanat was jailed in June, and she's been sentenced to 2 years in prison and an additional 2 years of supervision. This is for participating in a peaceful protest, marching against the protest law, calling for her brother Alaa's release from prison.
Alaa, the well-known activist who
yes.
we've been covering, and I hope you go to our website at democracynow.org to see our interviews and Sharif Abdel-Quddus's interview with him.
So she celebrated her 21st birthday in prison. She's she's an incredible filmmaker, an incredible person, creative mind, somebody that should be the future of Egypt. And so it is heartbreaking, devastating that the government is treating their youth this way.
Meanwhile, Karim, the Egyptian activists lost a final appeal at protest sentences Ahmed Maher, Ahmed Duma, and Mohammed Adel for taking part in unauthorized protests.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just something that shows you the way that the government is taking the country. When you imprison young activists like Ahmed Maher and like Sana and many of the people who were willing to die for this country, for Egypt, who were willing to help rebuild this country, who were putting their lives at stake, instead of taking those people who love their country and using them in the rebuilding of this country and using them as critical catalysts for that change, you're putting them in jail.
And Jahan, I'm just going to interrupt because we have 10 seconds. The Al Jazeera journalists Peter Gresti, Mohammed Fahmy, and Bahar Mohammed still in jail. You did Control Room.
Still in jail, unjustly in jail, and join many other journalists and protesters that should be out.
As both Egyptians and Americans right now, Egypt being the second largest recipient of U.S. aid, we need to, as active citizens, be aware of where our tax money is going.